We have some good news, everybody, about the fourth stimulus payment. Here's what I want you to know. Chuck Schumer just announced that the $1.75 trillion spending bill is going to greatly help fight inflation and lower the cost for Americans. So Americans will be receiving a $600 payment, but only if they meet new requirements. Plus, there are new programs and fourth stimulus payments that you could receive very, very soon. So you want to be sure to stay until the end of this video to find out more information about the fourth stimulus payment, folks.
Enough money. But that is not all, and I want the American people to know this, because I suspect many don't. It is very likely that in the defense bill, or attached to the defense bill, there will be a so-called competition bill. And this bill is a $250 billion bill that includes $52 billion in straight corporate welfare with no strings attached for a handful of extremely profitable microchip companies. Now, is there a problem in that our country is not producing the kind of microchips, the number of microchips that we should? The answer is yes. It's an issue that we have to deal with it. But we can deal with it in a way other than simply handing money to a handful of enormously profitable corporations with no protection for the taxpayer at all. Oh, and by the way, I should also mention that as part of the so-called competition bill, there is also a $10 billion handout to Jeff Bezos, one of the wealthiest people in our country, for space exploration. Combining these two pieces of legislation would push the price tag of the defense bill to over $1 trillion for 1 year. And I want people to remember that, because when we talk about Build Back Better, you talk about a 10-year bill. This is 1 year. Meanwhile, while there is limited discussion about the defense bill or corporate welfare in the competition bill, Congress has spent month after month discussing the Build Back Better Act, which on an annual basis costs far less than the Pentagon budget, and discussing whether or not we can afford to protect the working families of our country whose needs have been ignored decade after decade, who in many cases are living paycheck to paycheck, can't afford housing, can't afford prescription drugs, can't afford to send their kids to college. We can't address their needs. No. Because we're too busy worrying about throwing money at the Pentagon and large profitable corporations. Madam President, if there was ever a moment in modern American history when we need to fundamentally review our national priorities, now is that moment. Whether it is transforming our energy system away from fossil fuels, whether it's guaranteeing paid family and medical leave, whether it's providing health care to all of our people as a human right, as virtually every other major country does, whether it is taking on the greed of the pharmaceutical industry, which charges us by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, whether it is addressing our crisis in affordable housing or providing child care and pre-K to the little kids, now is the time to reassess our priorities. Now is the time to fight for real change. But instead of addressing these major issues that impact the lives of working families all across this country and that the working class of this country desperately wants, Congress comes together, Democrats and Republicans, with minimal debate.
The Agriculture Secretary just announced that $700 million in grant funding will be available through the new Farm and Food Workers Relief Program. This is done to help farm workers and meatpacking workers with the crisis, and the announcement was to recognize the essential role and cost that grocery store workers receive. $20 million of this amount has been set aside for at least one pilot program to support grocery workers and test options for reaching them in the future. The new program is funded by the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 and is part of USDA's Build Back Better efforts to respond and recover from the crisis. The program will provide relief to farm workers and meatpacking workers, as well as frontline grocery workers for expenses that they received during the crisis. This relief is intended to defray costs for reasonable and necessary personnel, family, or living expenses. Plus, multiple states have given their own state residents a stimulus check. Has your state done the same thing? Have you received a state stimulus check from your governor, everybody? I want to know your thoughts on this. I want to know. Tell me in the comments below. Now, there are many states that are sending out state stimulus checks. If you're a resident of New Hampshire, you may qualify for a $1,000 stimulus check if your household includes a family of 3 without an income. In addition, in Arizona, out-of-work residents can now take advantage of the state's Back to Work program. Those who go back to work part-time are eligible for $1,000, and those returning to full-time could get $2,000 stimulus checks. California implemented the Golden State Stimulus Check program, everybody, and this was done to help all state residents. And everybody in Florida, teachers and principals will receive $1,000 stimulus checks. And these are stimulus cash payments for their commitment to educating during the crisis. And the Connecticut governor has just announced a Back to Work program for $1,000 stimulus checks. The requirements are more involved than the states, with specifics on when residents filed for unemployment and how long they were on unemployment. Residents are also required to have obtained a job to be eligible for the stimulus payment. And those living in Idaho could be eligible for a one-time income tax rebate. More than 500,000 residents received cash, and the average check was around $248. And that's good news, folks. But still, Democrats are focusing their message on Biden's Build Back Better bill. It's in response to inflation, it's concerns from voters and key centrist lawmakers. The White House and Democratic leaders have rebranded the legislation as an antidote to widespread price hikes, arguing that it would lower the cost of prescriptions and childcare. The measure calls for spending of $1.75 trillion over a decade on a variety of democratic priorities, from healthcare subsidies to clean energy. It would give the government the power to negotiate prices for certain medicines. And Democrats aim to cover the cost of the social safety net package through taxes on corporations and more money for IRS enforcement. They also insist that the legislation will be fully paid for ahead of a Congressional Budget Office analysis expected this week. But some Democratic moderates say they're more worried that the increased cost would hit numerous sectors of the economy. Manchin has been sounding the alarm about inflation for months and declined to say whether the legislation addresses his concern. And consumer prices jumped by 6.2% last month. That's the biggest inflation surge in more than 30 years. About half of Americans blame the cost of rising goods on Biden, and Republicans are seeking to create political pain for Democrats over inflation. Who's to blame, everybody, for the current state of the country? Tell me in the comments below. Who do you think it is, everybody? I want to know your thoughts on this.